Ahead. So I'm going to start us off, of course, welcoming everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the Standing Committee on City Finance and Services meeting of Wednesday, April 24th, 2024. This committee meeting is being convened by electronic means as authorized under the Part 14 of the Procedure Bylaw, City of Vancouver electronic meetings. And as such, committee members and the public may participate in person or by electronic means. If a committee member attending electronically loses connection during the voting process, team members are available to get you back online quickly while the voting process is suspended and the team members' contact information has been circulated to you. And of course, video of committee members speaking and presentations vote results will be projected on the live stream when available. Committee members are reminded that in accordance with Section 14.13 of the Procedure Bylaw, members must enable their video to confirm quorum. In case of an emergency where we need to evacuate the building, I'd like to direct your attention to the exits. There are 2 exits beyond the glass doors and to the left. If the glass doors are obstructed, please direct your attention to the 4 exits in the chamber, and please use the stairs, not the elevators. I'd also like to highlight that there is a defibrillator located at the end of the hallway outside the council chamber. We acknowledge that we are on the unceded homelands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. We thank them for having cared for this land and look forward to working with them in partnership as we continue to build this great city together. And I'd also like to take a moment to recognize the immense contributions of our City of Vancouver staff who work hard every day to help make our city an incredible place to live, work, and City Clerks, may we have the roll call?
Councillor Bligh in the chair, Mayor Sim, Councillor Carr, Councillor Kirby Young.
Present.
Councillor Dominato, Councillor Boyle, Councillor Fry is on a leave of absence for civic business all day. Councillor Montague is on a leave of absence for personal reasons all day. Councillor Klassen.
Present.
Councillor Meisner is on a leave of absence for civic business all day. Councillor Joe.
Present.
You have quorum, Chair Bligh.
Great, thank you very much. So any comments on agenda items can be sent to council using the web form on the city's website. The link to that form will be posted on X at Van City Clerk. And I'd also like to note the City of Vancouver's long-standing commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion, including the utmost respect for all genders. I remind the committee that when addressing speakers and the city's team members, we will avoid using gendered honorifics and will instead refer to the person by first, last name, role, or title. Today we have 9 reports and 2 council members' motions. So I just want to go over the plan for the day. We will break at noon for lunch, then return at 1 p.m. to continue to deal with the remainder of the agenda. If needed, we'll recess at 5 for a dinner break and then complete at 6 p.m. The rest of the agenda. If the meeting does not finish today, we will reconvene Tuesday, April 30th at 3 p.m. So the committee is now going to consider matters adopted on consent, and we have reports 1, and I see folks are on the queue, so I'll just walk this through, and then we have reports 1, 3, and 5 to 9 on the consent agenda for the committee's consideration. We will hold report 2A to hear from speakers, and we will also hold Budget Resolution 2B and Report 4 for separate votes. So that's in the plan. They will not be on consent. So the committee has the option now to adopt the recommendations for reports 1, 3, and 5 through 9. And Councillor Kirby Young, I see you're on the queue.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'd like to hold Report 1, Property Tax Policy Review, Phase 1, please.
Okay. Thank you very much. And next we have Councillor Klassen.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to hold Report 9, Mayor's Budget Task Force Implementation Committee, terms of reference, please.
Okay, we're holding Report 9. So we're holding Report 1 and Report 9. I see Councillor Carr. Okay, we'll be holding Report 6. So that means that we have Report 3 and we have Report 5 And report 7 and 8, all on the consent agenda. Does any member wish to hold any of the items for debate or questions? That doesn't count. Move adoption. Thank you very much, Councillor Klassen. Second. Who did I hear second from? Councillor Carr. Great. Thank you very much. And does any, nope, went through. Okay, and then does any member wish to declare a conflict of interest? On consent items, seeing none, I've listed the reports that we have for approval. We've got adoption, we've got it seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, so we will just recap. We have report 3, which is 2023 property tax exemptions. Report 5, Housing and Homelessness Service Grants, 2024 Supportive Housing Capital Grants. And also report 7, Annual Procurement Report 2023. And report 8, Contract Award for Microsoft Enterprise Agreement, all passed on consent. Okay, so we are now going to deal with report 1, which is Property Tax Policy Review Phase 1. Does any member wish to declare a conflict of interest on this item? To put yourself on the queue. Okay, sorry, one sec.
Yeah. Just to clarify, report 4, we're going to be dealing with that separately because of the 2/3.
Yeah, that was identified at the beginning.
Thank you.
Yeah, as along with 2A and 2B.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for checking. Okay, great. So now we are moving to report 1, which has a presentation, and we do. I see Grace Chang at the podium here to introduce the item.
Thank you. Good morning, Committee Chair and Council. As you recall, last year, mid-year 2023, Council directed staff to undertake a property tax policy review to assess the city's property tax policy, advocacy of the mitigation tools, including targeted averaging and developing potential relief program, the tax share approach, and other relevant metrics to gauge the business climate in Vancouver and also the competitiveness relative to other neighboring municipalities. As a result of the terms of reference, this study has been broken up into 2 phases. Today, Council will hear the first phase, which is focusing on the tax distribution portion of the work. So EY has been engaged to do this review for us. So Brad is going to come up and do a presentation to demonstrate the work that has been done and what is leading to their recommendation to Council. Thank you.
Good morning. So as a quick introduction, my name is Brett Totham and I'm a manager in EY's Economic Advisory Practice and also the project manager for the Property Tax Policy Review. So before I begin, I'd just like to thank Council for the opportunity to speak on an important topic today. We recognise that it's important for the city's property taxation policy to maintain an appropriate balance between the residential and non-residential sectors. And achieving this balance will help keep the city habitable and appealing for residents, also encouraging a competitive and investment-friendly market to boost business activity and job opportunities. Apologies. Oh, there we go. So for today, I'll be speaking to the following items. So first, we'll take Council through some contextual information for the property tax policy review, our approach, the stakeholder engagement process, and the metric results themselves, and our overarching conclusion. So first, this slide here provides a brief overview of the individuals involved in this project, which not only include EY and city staff, but also expert advisors and the previous property tax policy commissioners of Dr. Hamilton, Dr. Slack, and Mr. Adams. We also drew insight from multiple EY subject matter experts, including Kevin Brennan, who's our West Coast Markets leader, Mohammed Babmani, who is our municipalities leader in EY, Fred O'Riordan, who has over 30 years of tax experience, Heather Taylor, who was previously the CFO for the City of Toronto, Kirsten Tisdale, who's our government advisory leader here in Vancouver, and Andrew Evans, who's also a local real estate partner. So throughout the study, we drew on these individuals to verify our analysis and gain their insights. So I'd like to just provide some foundational information and key points which we use to underpin the property tax review. So we note that the city aims to have a property taxation policy which meets the principles and goals described on the left-hand side there, which are primarily focused on achieving fairness and economic efficiency. And we know that the city currently uses a tax share approach to distribute property taxation, with the current shares at 57% for the residential sector and 43% for the non-residential sector. Before we move on, we'd just like to highlight a few of the key features of property taxation, which are important to keep in mind throughout. So the first is that property taxes are calculated based on two variables. The first is the tax rate itself, and the second is the property value. So as property values increase, it's not unusual to see the property tax rate itself decrease to balance out this impact. Also, we note that an increase or a decrease in property values does not necessarily mean businesses or households have an increased or decreased capacity to pay property taxes. And lastly, the property tax rates themselves are not a direct measure of property taxation levels in a municipality. So for example, if you were to get two municipalities and compare their property taxation rates, it's not going to provide an accurate comparison of the overarching property taxation levels in those jurisdictions. So this just provides some historical information before we get into our approach. So firstly, we note that there were previous reviews undertaken in 2007 and 2014, which examined tax shares and also the tax volatility, with the 2007 review recommending a shift from the commercial to residential classes, the 2014 shift not recommending a further shift in tax shares, and they also developed a set of metrics for the city to continue to monitor and help guide future decisions. We also note that there was a further shift directed by Council in 2019 outside of a formal review process. So for our study, our scope included determining whether the current residential and non-residential tax shares are appropriate, updating the existing metrics and extending them to cities outside of Metro Vancouver, namely Calgary, Toronto and Montreal, and to develop new metrics for the residential sector and non-residential sector, noting that the 2014 review only considered metrics for the non-residential sector. When we developed the new metrics, we had overarching principles which help guided the development, which included transparency, replicability, and reliability, knowing that the intention of these metrics is for council or the city to continue to monitor these over time. The list of metrics is described on the right-hand side here, and we'll be going through the results shortly. Briefly, before that, we wanted to just touch on comparisons with Toronto, Calgary, and Montreal, and the difficulty with making these comparisons compared to the city of Vancouver through several factors. So one of them is that those municipalities have much larger populations than the city of Vancouver. So for example, the city of Toronto has a population that's roughly 4 times the size of the city of Vancouver. Their reliance on property taxation also differs. So for example, around 60% of expenditure for Vancouver is funded through property taxes, whereas in Toronto it's around 31%. These jurisdictions also have different methods for deriving property taxation, including different rates and property classes. And lastly, they also fund different types of services. So for example, transportation in Vancouver is funded separately through the TransLink property tax rate, whereas in Toronto it's included in their general levy rate. So earlier on in the review, we attempted to adjust or normalise some of the existing metric results to enable an apples and apples comparison with these jurisdictions outside of Metro Vancouver. However, these methods introduced additional risks and limitations associated with interpretation, communicating, and replicating the results. So therefore, we've taken the approach that we've only included Toronto, Calgary, and Montreal for the new metrics we have devised. And for these new metrics, we have adopted an all property tax approach. And what this means is that when you see these metrics, we're including all property taxes from all taxing authorities. So that includes TransLink, schools tax, BC assessment, so that we can consider the overarching property tax bill comparisons between the City of Vancouver, those other Metro Vancouver municipalities, and Toronto, Calgary, and Montreal. Also wanted to briefly touch on the stakeholder engagement activities that were undertaken. So we engaged with 4 principal business groups. So the Vancouver Board of Trade, some business improvement areas, the Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses, and the Building Owners and Managers Association of BC. While we note that they were all supportive of a reduction in non-residential property taxation, there were a set of common themes raised by these stakeholder groups. The first is consumption studies. So there was a view that the taxes paid by the non-residential sector is not commensurate with the services received, noting that such a study would be very difficult to undertake methodologically, and it was not included in the scope of this phase 1 review. The second point was around representative properties. So due to data limitations, the new metrics use downtown office spaces as a proxy for non-residential properties, noting that it's very difficult to find an apples and apples comparison of a very similar property in Vancouver compared to Toronto, Montreal, Calgary, and other Metro Vancouver municipalities. We also noted that all the stakeholders noted small businesses are currently doing it tough with the current economic conditions. And lastly, proportional taxation. So some stakeholders believe that non-residential properties may be paying a disproportionate amount of property tax compared to the assessment base that they comprise. However, after adjusting for some of the intrinsic assessment or valuation differences between non-residential and residential land, we find that this concern may not be valid at this time. So the first slide, we'll get into the metric results here. So this first slide shows the business tax share, the business tax rate, business taxes per capita, and commercial building permits, which acts as a proxy for private investment in Vancouver. So as you can see here, despite Vancouver's business tax rate being quite low, business taxes per capita are one of the highest of the Metro Vancouver municipalities, and that goes to the point that a low tax rate doesn't necessarily mean low property taxes. We can also see that commercial building permits have remained quite consistent and show that Vancouver has experienced a consistent share of investment compared to the greater Vancouver Regional District. This next slide shows business assessment values, the share of non-market changes. So these are things like non-market changes are like land improvements, new construction, land zoning changes. And we'll also see the business tax rate ratio, and also a new metric of all property taxes per square foot for office properties. So these results show that Vancouver has clearly experienced a consistent growth in business property values, and that property taxes per square foot for an office property do appear to be outpacing other jurisdictions. The last two charts here for the non-residential metrics show property taxes to net asking rents for downtown office properties, and they also show the vacancy rates for downtown office properties. So what we can see here is that in proportion to rents, property taxes do appear to be comparable with other jurisdictions. And also, although vacancy rates are trending upwards, Vancouver is broadly comparable with other metropolitan cities such as Toronto. We should also note that an increase in the vacancy rate may not necessarily be due to economic conditions. It can also be due to new stock entering the market. Apologies. Do you know how I go back? Sorry. Yep, perfect. Oh, perfect. Thank you. So moving on to the residential side, this slide here shows residential tax share, the residential tax rate, residential taxes per capita, and the residential building permits, which acts as a proxy for sort of housing demand and residential investment. So as you can see on the residential taxes per capita, similar to the business taxes per capita, Vancouver is one of the highest taxing jurisdictions. Also, we can see that residential building permits have grown steadily as well. We can also note that it makes sense for Toronto and Calgary, for example, in the residential building permits to have a higher level of gross residential investment, considering that they have much larger populations compared to Vancouver. So this final slide here shows the residential assessment values and their non-market changes, and also property taxes compared to median income for individuals or households who live in single-family dwellings and apartments, which is defined as any multi-residential unit. So we can see here that although Vancouver has a low growth rate for the non-market changes, it is starting from a much larger base compared to other jurisdictions. And the charts on the right do also show that property taxes as a percentage of the median income are higher than other Metro Vancouver municipalities for single-family dwellings, but for apartments they are more comparable. So after considering these metrics, we note that there isn't one metric that can necessarily tell us what the appropriate tax shares should be. So we tried to look at them on a holistic basis and see what the narrative was telling us. And from this conclusion, we note that our opinion is that there is insufficient evidence to support a further shift in tax shares at this time. Noting, as we mentioned, there's not one metric that can inform these shares, and there are certain limitations with our analysis, which we do note in the report. Thank you for listening.
And thank you very much. I'm just looking to see whether or not we have questions. I know Councillor Kirby Young, you held this report, so this would be the time for you to go in the queue. Great, thanks very much. We'll start with questions from Councillor Kirby Young. You have 5 minutes to address team members.
Actually, Chair, I see Councillor Claassen has questions, and I would like to bring and move the report with an amendment, so I'm going to let him go ahead, and I'll go after him.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Councillor Claassen.
Thanks very much. Appreciate the fulsome report and the work of our outside consultants and the panel of advisors that have sort of been through this process over many years. Just general question about where do we sort of see this going in the future? Obviously, we have a point in time now and a recommendation from staff and from our advisors, but I know that this process has really began in the late 2000s, was brought back by several members of our council today in 2019. But what do we foresee in the future in terms of going fast on these rates?
Thank you. Yeah, this is definitely council a decision. If council wants to make it more of a regular kind of cadence, every 5 years or every 6 years, we can do that. Or if there's anything that materially changes, even during that period, yeah, council can direct staff to kind of reconvene or undertake another review. That's no issue at all.
Okay. Yeah. Just generally speaking, I guess our bellwether is a little bit are things like vacancy rates, turnover in businesses, some of the things that have been cited in the report. How do we explain some of the disparities from one high street to the next? For example, Commercial Drive, seemingly very successful. Many other many of our sort of main sort of high streets doing very, very well. I live off of Fraser Street. There doesn't appear to be any vacancies there at all. New businesses opening. So I sort of see a bit of mixed messages in terms of what we're seeing in the economy right now.
Yeah, it is definitely the case, I think, everywhere, right? I mean, even if you're looking at other municipalities as well, it's typically the case. I would say that not being a real estate expert, but I think depending on whether there's any kind of major redevelopment kind of thing happening, say, for example, South Granville, because of my understanding is that the Broadway plan and the TOAs, that kind of thing, I think that probably will be a bit more impacted versus Commercial Drive. And also in downtown, when you see the vacancy rate, I know we're not just talking about storefront, but even for offices, because there has been a lot of new product coming online. So when you look at office vacancy rate, yeah, it's high, it's naturally higher, more than just the economy itself. I think it's also about what is in the pipeline as well. Because we have really gone through quite a bit of robust construction in downtown, in particular in the office area.
I just have to ask, as you mentioned the SkyTrain work, was there any thought to looking at how rapid transit infrastructure can sort of really evolve and benefit different commercial areas? Yeah,
well, naturally, it will just kind of bring more people there. It becomes a hub, right? So, however, understandably, during the construction phase, it will be quite disruptive, and that is common knowledge. And then the other thing is that, in particular, right now, linking to the legislation about the TOA legislation, you will also be bringing in people and residential, rental projects in those areas. And when more people and more foot traffic, it will bring more I would say visits to the businesses, but again, I think this is a whole journey. It will take a couple of years or more than that. So I think it's really about during the transition time, what the city or other senior governments can do to help mitigate a bit of the risk, right?
I know that it's very important. The bottom line is ultimately what a lot of business owners will see, but I think there have been some changes in terms of service levels, trying to improve the granting that we've been doing for graffiti removal, for example, some additional work in boulevards and cleaning, street cleaning. Those are things that would benefit our sort of commercial areas as well as some business owners as well, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, of course.
Should be, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Klassen. Councillor Dominato.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you for the presentation this morning. I just have a couple of questions. One is with respect to your review. Did it include reviewing the impact of the 2019 tax shift? Was that part of your mandate or role in?
No, that wasn't part of our scope, no.
That wasn't part of the scope, okay. Was part of, in terms of, so speaking of scope then, was the development potential relief program part of the scope of your review?
No, it wasn't part of the scope directly, but we did consider it in our overarching recommendations. So noting that Vancouver has certain programs in place to help businesses deal with some of the property taxes that's upcoming, yeah.
Okay, and I see Grace is up to...
Oh, sorry, Grace, yeah.
Respond to that as well. Thank you.
Just want to add a little bit to that. Not in this report, but in the tax distribution report, we did reiterate and summarize what the result was in terms of the impact of the tax shift from the last round. That was the result of council directing staff to report back on the effectiveness, who is really getting the savings from the tax shift. So we incorporated that into the tax distribution report. It's part of that report. And with respect to the efficacy of the tax relief program, that will come as phase 2 of the property tax policy review. The reason for that is because we only have 2 years worth of data on the property tax, development potential relief program, and we have been having the targeted averaging. So we're thinking that maybe collect, basically one or two more years of data before we embark on that. That's why we are planning on doing the phase 2 starting next year.
Okay, yeah. And maybe Grace, just while you're there, can I ask you just a follow-up question around that? Because I know we're unique in applying that initiative, and I know we made some changes as a council to improve it based on feedback we had from property owners and businesses last year. Is there, as we evaluate that, are we looking at the vacancy rate data that we have access to and have shared? And I know I've met with a number of BIAs, and I know it varies from area to area. Is that part? Are we looking at that in the context of that program?
You mean the Development Potential Relief Program? Yes. That being said, actually vacant storefront and vacant properties in the provincial legislation, based on a point in time, decided if it is vacant, then it is not eligible. It is a provincial requirement, not a city requirement. However, based on the feedback that we got from the stakeholder last year, what we heard from the stakeholder is that just don't stick to the minimum requirement, which is having the property to be occupied by just 1 day, then they can be eligible. So based on stakeholder feedback, we expanded it to the property has to be in occupancy between October and December for the previous year. So at least it has to be occupied by like the last 3 months in the year, then they will be eligible for the DPRP.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dominato. Councillor Kirby.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to move the recommendations with the amendment that I have circulated to all of Council. Is it okay if I go ahead and do that now?
Great. I'm just going to move us to an amendment queue. Do I need to do that, clerks, actually? Because it's the report with the... Yes, okay. Great. Councillor Kirby, I'll just have you back on the queue.
Thank you very much. So yeah,
Councillor Zhou is seconded. Just for your reference, as you're online.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate that. Noting that this report was received for information, but the importance of ensuring that we have a competitive environment and an environment that's conducive to supporting small businesses thriving in the city. Moving the report with the amendment that states that staff be directed to continue to actively monitor the tax rate ratio and to observe tax shifts in neighboring municipalities to assess their potential impact on Vancouver's competitive position, so as to proactively ensure the principles of stability, predictability, accountability, fairness, and competitiveness are at the forefront of the city's property tax considerations in alignment with regional dynamics and various other relevant national benchmarks, And further, that staff report back in advance of and to inform the annual tax distribution decision, which comes before council every year. And to provide some perspective and comments on that, there was a number of us that supported a tax shift of 2% last term over 3 years, and 1%, 0.5, and 0.5. And we recognized at that time that Vancouver was not competitive relative to other municipalities, and the effect of that, as we're able to see from some of the information that was presented, sort of right-sized that trend to ensure that we are as competitive as Surrey, Burnaby, et cetera, within our region. I think it's important to note now that while the ratio has become more competitive, certainly the factors in the environment can change, and municipalities are making changes, as are we over time. And we want to make sure that the trajectories of those graphs that we saw do not start to change and Vancouver doesn't start to level up. So I'll also note, and I think it's important context, that Council is really committed to supporting our local businesses, and there's a number of initiatives underway that we think are delivering the additional services and value that our small business community particularly are looking for. So, for example, we have supported a new business and economy office to streamline support for those businesses and really ensure that we can direct Vancouver's efforts towards that while recognizing the distinct role of Invest Vancouver. We're working very hard to cut red tape, and one example of that is reducing the number of business license types from what was a whopping 570 down to just 88. We've introduced the e-plan to transform the permitting process to a digital platform so that that can be completed online, making it quicker and easier for small businesses who are really time pressured. We're supporting our hospitality sector with things like lifting the moratorium on bars and restaurants in a number of the neighborhoods, such as Granville Entertainment District, Chinatown, Gastown, Victory Square, to have equity across the city. And we do know that local businesses continue to struggle due to challenges with the pandemic, but we're also to have to strike that balance with the affordability needs of our residents. And if the businesses are, for example, paying less, then we know our residents are paying more, and our residents are really tapped out right now. And again, we want to make sure that the businesses are getting charged a fair amount, but they're getting value for those services. So the last thing I'll note is that tax burdens can shift over time. I think we need to remain open to them, and this doesn't preclude us potentially doing one in future. But I also think we want to see the payoff from work like the Mayor's Budget Task Force and some of the other efforts that we're hoping and expecting will pay dividends in terms of being able to keep our tax rates reasonable moving forward, given the affordability pressures that we know that our business community are facing. So that's really the spirit around it, and that this is identified as an important priority for Council to continue to monitor and to get that information as part of the budgeting process and ahead of that tax ratio report that's getting set every year, so that we are not behind the 8 ball, but we're actually making sure that Vancouver is at par or leading in the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Klassen to the amendment.
Thank you, Chair. I will be supporting this amendment, and thank Councillor Kirby Young for bringing it forward. The sort of the legacy of the wide range between the commercial property tax rates and residential is a legacy that goes back probably about 30 years. It's one that we've inherited, but we have seen attempts such as in 2007. Later in 2019, a number of councillors came together to support more work on that tax shift, but for many years we did not see any enthusiasm or real interest, sadly, from previous councils to really address this issue. So I'm very pleased to support this in the spirit that it puts the language there that resolves that this council will continue to evaluate and be able to continue to keep this on our radar, watching how that rate affects our business community that we want so very much to support, and that this will be a way for us to be bound to that commitment to continue to review this, whereas there had been long periods of time where there was no interest in having that kind of evaluation. So I'm again very supportive of this, and would like to reiterate some of the things that Councillor Kirby Young talks about the good work that's been happening here with staff, with some of the streamlining, the work around regulatory hurdles, and of course the exciting new business and economy office that we'll start to see open later this year that will work directly with our BIA partners and other businesses in the community. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor Klassen, seeing no one else on the queue, we will go to a vote on the amendment and receiving the report for information. Thank you. And that motion passes with none in opposition. Okay, so we will go back to the main motion and vote on it in its entirety. So seeing no one else on the queue, we'll go ahead and ask you to vote, please, on screen.
Chair, just a point of clarification on procedure. I moved the report with the amendment, so that does require 2 votes.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Thank you.
And that passes also with none in opposition. So that does conclude item 1, report 1 on the report. So thank you very much, staff. And we will be moving to report 2, which is likely the same group of staff. So we'll move to 2024 property taxation, distribution of property tax levy. And before we get started here, does any member wish to declare a conflict of interest on this item? And seeing none, this item does not have a staff presentation, but we do have speakers. So we do have time now for any member to ask questions of staff. So you have 5 minutes to ask those questions. And Councillor Zhou.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So one clarification question is, I read the report for the financial implication sections. It says the final tax increase this year is 7.28%, not the early estimate of 7.5%. Can we expand on that, please?
Thank you for your question. We, on an annual basis, Council approved the budget before year end, and that is before BC Assessment finalized the assessment roll. So when we get the final assessment roll, we always true up. That's why when Council approve your budget, you approve the total tax levy that needs to be collected, and based on the total levy that needs to be collected, and based on the final authenticated assessment roll, this is what the result is. It's slightly lower than the 7.5.
Okay, so that's really good news. Do we have an estimation, how much difference we're talking about compared to 7.28 and 7.5? In terms of the impact for the business and also the residents?
We have, but can we come back? You don't want to hold up your time? Yeah.
That's very good. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's all my questions. So I really want that number.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Zhou. So seeing no one else on the queue, we will move to hear from registered speakers for this report. So as a reminder, public speakers, I should state whether they are in support or opposition to the recommendations and may only speak once. And I will also ask speakers if they are residents of Vancouver, if it's not indicated on the list. And before we move to our speakers list, I also would just like to inform Council that we had a discrepancy in the registered speaker sign up. And so we do have a speaker that's come forward, or somebody who desires to speak to Council on this item who's not on your list. Very well could be a technical glitch within our sign up system, but really is at the discretion of Chair and Council to suspend the bylaw and allow the speaker to speak. Thank you. So, okay, all those in favor? And so we will add to the bottom of the list, Speaker Michelle Barile, Executive Director of West Broadway, BIA. So that's great. So we'll add that as speaker number 6. And let's start at the top. So we've got Emily Boston as our first registered speaker.
Good morning, Council. My name is Emily Boston, and I'm the BC Senior Policy Analyst for the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, which, as you know, is the country's largest small business association, representing and voicing the interests of 97,000 small businesses in Canada and 843 here in Vancouver. In light of today's deliberation on the 2024 distribution of Vancouver's property tax levy, I'm here to speak in opposition and share insights on how the city's current property tax distribution disproportionately burdens small businesses and urge Council to consider adopting a more fair, balanced approach moving forward. As you know, property taxes are a particularly challenging cost for small businesses to absorb because they're profit insensitive, meaning businesses must pay them regardless of their revenues. Recent CFIB data shows that 4 in 10 Vancouver small businesses have seen their property tax bill increase by at least 11% in the last year, and another 3 in 10 say their bill has increased by more than 20%. Just yesterday, a small business owner wrote into CFIB saying, "We simply cannot get ahead. With rising rents, property taxes, and poor economic conditions, Vancouver businesses are dropping like flies. This is our 20th year in business, which should be something to celebrate, but instead we are worried, scared, and concerned for the future ahead." When we asked local small businesses how rising property taxes have impacted their business, 41% said it's prevented them from expanding their operations and hiring more people, and over half have had to raise prices to offset costs, which of course ultimately comes back to the consumer. While the report commissioned by Ernst & Young, sorry, Brett stole some of my thunder earlier, has a consistent focus on affordability for residents, it lacks the same depth and breadth of information on commercial property tax burdens. Surprisingly, the report doesn't tally the number of commercial versus residential properties and the property taxes they pay relative to their share of assessment. For example, Vancouver property taxes shoulder 40% of property tax revenues, but only account for 19% of total assessed properties. Currently, Vancouver's 2.13 fairness ratio is worse than neighboring cities like Burnaby, Surrey, and Richmond. A recent CFIB report shows that shifting Vancouver's property tax revenue distribution by 2% over 4 years, so 0.5% yearly, would return substantial savings to businesses. The average commercial property in Vancouver would save more than $4,600 over 4 years, but in stark contrast, it would only cost the average residential property an extra $334 over that same 4-year period. Small business owners told us that they will use these significant tax savings to invest in their business, create more jobs, improve productivity, and contribute to the local economy. We know Council is working hard to prioritize small businesses, especially with programs like the DPRP that Grace spoke to earlier, and we recognize that this is a difficult balancing act, but moving towards a fairer property tax distribution will ensure our small businesses receive the much needed relief that they need and continue to make our community a vibrant place to live and operate a business. Thank you, Council, for your time and consideration this morning.
Great, and thank you very much. That was perfectly timed. So we'll now move to speaker number 2, Paul Sullivan.
Thank you.
I have a handout.
Great, the clerks will come and collect that from you, Paul, and distribute it to Council.
Just while that's being handed out, and perhaps before my time starts, I just wanted to acknowledge Grace. Grace is probably the most proactive finance person of all municipalities in the Lower Mainland on tax relief for small business, and has shown she's passionate for small business, and it's certainly something that's appreciated by all of us.
Thank you very much for those comments.
Yeah. So, I guess I think the nicest thing I want to say about the EY report is it's disappointing. It's overly simple. It's dismissive on so many fronts, and frankly, I think it completely misses the mark on the issues at hand. The first thing that came to my mind is, why is there nothing in this report on retail? So I did a word search, retail. That word retail appears one time in that entire report, and it says there's nothing compelling to consider of any concern with vacancy on retail in the city of Vancouver. You go to the data that the city has produced, the majority of your BIAs are in an unhealthy position with regard to vacancy throughout your entire city. So it's totally at odds with that. It said there's no issue with regard to office in vacancy. My firm took $5.5 billion off the assessment roll on office buildings this year because they are doing so poorly and have so much vacancy. And you won't see a new office building built in this town for a very long time because the value that 401 West Georgia just sold at is less than what it costs to build. So there are a lot of problems that were completely glossed over, in my opinion. I want to take you to the handout I just gave you, which is page 20 of their report. This is alarming to me, and it's the property taxes per capita for business property. And if you draw a line through most of those municipalities, you're sitting at about $300 per capita, and Vancouver's sitting there at $500 per capita, and under your watch, that gap is rapidly changing. You ought to be alarmed by this, and I'm going to explain why that happened. And if you want to flip to page 22 of their report, you're going to see no gap in the residential situation with regard to the City of Vancouver versus other municipalities. That should be alarming to you. In my 1 minute left, I'm going to talk about page 1 of my report, please. And if you could turn yourself to it, I emailed it to everybody. There's 2 graphs on page 1 that you need to understand. In the past 10 years, we have grown 600 new commercial properties and 25,000 new residential properties. That's a growth rate of 42 to 1. 42 residential properties per commercial. In the past 5 years, it's got substantially worse. We've had a total of 68 new properties in commercial and 12,000 residential. That's 184 to 1. Think about your budget increases and how that's been absorbed by the change in the number of properties in our town. It ain't working out, and the numbers are in the graph below, and you need to understand those too, because the residents, the increase in the tax burden over the past 5 years has been $420 per resident. In the past 10 years, $1,300 per residential property. Go down below, the increase in the tax burden on commercial properties is $3,700 per commercial property and $11,600 in the past 20 years, 10 years, sorry. So compare your $11,600 per year versus your $1,369 on residents. We are killing our small businesses. We are not growing business. We are rapidly increasing our tax burden on what businesses we have. And the data in the EY report says this problem is getting rapidly worse in recent years. And so I want to leave you with that. I think the evidence, all sides support a shift now because it's getting worse.
Thank you very much, Paul, for those comments. We will now move to speaker number 3, Patricia Barnes.
Good morning, Chair, Council, and Mayor. My name is Patricia Barnes, and I'm the Executive Director of the East Village BIA, which is situated on the traditional and unceded lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. We are in opposition to the recommendation. As you know, we are asking for a 0.5% shift from commercial property tax to residential property tax over the next 4 years. We recognize the EY report did not support the shift, and none of us are surprised. We assumed that was a foregone conclusion. However, it does not take into account the state of the small businesses in Vancouver. As the city's data indicates, Vancouver overall has an unhealthy vacancy rate, and my BIA is one of those commercial areas with a high percentage of vacancy. And in addition, everything we read says the expectation is that more and more businesses are going to close over the next little while due to financial pressures. Our businesses need your support. In fact, they are counting on your support based on promises during the election. We do recognize the DRPR program has been initiated and supported, and we are thankful for that work. We hope to continue to work in partnership with the city to pressure the province to include their share of property tax in this program. However, we also have to note that any savings are redistributed in class. The Vancouver BIA partnership, in conjunction with Loco BC, are conducting surveys of our business community to look at the cost of doing business in Vancouver. Questions from small businesses, my members in the last week. Why am I doing this? Why don't I get any respect from City Hall? Does the city want small businesses in Vancouver? Why is it so hard to operate? I don't understand why the city puts so many impediments in our way and makes everything so complicated. What did we do wrong? These are heartbreaking questions from people who are striving for a better neighborhood and a better city. We represent over 95% of the businesses in Vancouver who hire young people, who hire new immigrants, who support youth sports, people in need, who support action against climate change, who provide a place for seniors, who are active in their community and part of what makes our area such a vibrant and active, welcoming place. The city is unaffordable for small businesses. We are seeing increased owner-operator burnout and dissatisfaction. Many of the costs borne by these businesses are beyond their control. Property tax, inflation, downloaded cost of sick days, increases in minimum wage. We also note that many of them are important, but when we also see increases in business permits, property tax increases beyond the rate of inflation, increase in garbage removal fees, I could go on and on and on. What are the businesses supposed to do? The only places they can cut expenses are in reduction in labor, which is a vicious circle. As fewer employees, fewer opening hours, reduction in service, loss of revenue, increased owner burnout. Other options, reduction in quality of goods as they search for cheaper inputs, and reduction in the money the owner can pay themselves as they struggle to also feed and clothe their own children. Margins are disappearing, and small business operators are not only working in their stores, but in the evenings they're involved in workshops, teaching, etc., to try and stay afloat. It is time to show our small businesses that you are listening and that they are important for a healthy, vibrant city, that their sacrifices are recognized, and that we do want business in the city of Vancouver.
Attention to the time. Yeah,
okay.
Sorry. I know that 3 minutes goes very fast now.
Yes, it does.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for addressing council today on this matter. So we will now move to speaker number 4, Jane Talbot. Just as a reminder, we have 3 minutes on the clock for our comments now, not 5. So.
Madam Chair, Mayor and Council, good morning. Thank you. My name is Jane Talbot. I'm the CEO of the Downtown Vancouver Business Improvement Association, and I think most of you know that we represent about 8,000 businesses in the central business district of our city. I'm here today to express our opposition to the recommended distribution of the general purpose tax as outlined on the agenda and supporting materials submitted to the Standing Committee on City Finance and Services. Vancouver businesses continue to struggle in the wake of the pandemic. Now more than ever, we must ensure that operating in our city is painless and barrier-free. The city has an opportunity to make a tangible difference in the operating environment through this decision, and we encourage members of this committee to consider a 0.5 tax shift in property tax from non-residential to residential properties each year over the next 4 years. In the last 10 years, taxes per residential property increased by $1,369, while taxes per commercial property went up by $11,608. That is a 750% difference. We hear it directly from our business community. This tax burden is unsustainable. Moreover, it is untenable given the additional costs of cleaning, security, public safety, streetscape maintenance, and development costs being shouldered by BIAs in the business community. Whether it be permits, increased fees in general, cost of goods, increased rent, and security fees, downtown businesses are seeing rising costs coming from all directions. Businesses require relief. Downtown Van and our partner BIAs invite the committee to consider the findings and recommendations outlined in the summary document produced by BTA Tax Alliance led by expert tax leader Ryan. We hope you find, as we do, that a 0.5 shift in ratio from non-residential to residential properties each year over the next 4 years would be a reasonable adjustment during this challenging economic period. We have heard from downtown business owners that they are struggling to stay afloat during this time due to the rising cost of doing business and other economic challenges. This would be a significant step to supporting local small business storefronts, as well as businesses in general, whose operations and services form the backbone of character and culture in our city. Thank you for your consideration. Thank you for your time.
And thank you very much, Jane, for your comments. Next, we'll hear from speaker number 5, Neil Wiles.
Good morning, Chair, Council, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief. I don't want to repeat some of the same points that my colleagues have said. I'm here with my BAA colleagues looking for a tax shift of 0.5% over the next 4 years. I was reading Dan's article in The Sun yesterday, and I found some of the numbers very distressing. That the taxes have increased over the last 10 years about 55%. That has far outpaced inflation, which is probably about 26%. The city of Vancouver is definitely out of control in that department. In preparation for this discussion, I called up one of my merchants and asked for their tax bill because I don't get a tax bill. And he said, which one? Workers' comp, employer's health tax, employment insurance, employment income tax contribution, Canada Pension Plan, federal tax, provincial tax, GST, provincial sales tax, or corporate tax. I said, no, not those ones. The one that is the City of Vancouver property tax bill with the provincial school tax, TransLink, and Metro. Despite trying to, we are not going to tax these businesses into prosperity. There is lots of vacancy in my district. I think about 14% right now, which is very unhealthy. And as you know, Mount Pleasant is probably the fastest growing area in the city right now. We've also seen a 46% hike in business license fees, which far exceeds staff recommendation of 6% to offset inflation. This fee is just another tax levied on businesses to obscure the true number of the property tax increase by the city. I think there's also an increase, yet another increase in dumpster fees. While the Mayor's Budget Task Force suggested finding other revenue sources, I don't think that this was in the spirit of that recommendation. I do want to mention the Development Potential Relief Program, and that Vancouver is using that to provide some relief to some certain businesses. The issue with this is that the relief is spread within class, and no other taxing authority has signed on to this. Although the relief is provided, it is not as impactful as we had hoped because the last tax increase, I think, was bigger than any relief. I don't want to be unfair, but without the province, Metro, TransLink, it's like shuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you, Neil. Our final registered speaker, as per the decision of council here, is Speaker 6, Michelle Baral.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Mayor and Council. Nice to see you all. First, I want to thank Grace for all your hard work. The Development Property Relief Program, it's very helpful, and you know, it's in its iteration. It's going to grow over time and hopefully get better over time. But we're very grateful that it was created. I just want to. My colleagues have made such excellent points, stats, stories. What can I add but just to say we support you. This is a team effort. This is not just a municipal challenge. We need the provincial support as well. So I think we know this is a wrong situation. We know it has to be fixed, but it needs to be fixed in a way that works for businesses, residents, for everybody. So please continue supporting us, continue with the Development Relief Program. Let's look at the core services, and as per the letter I submitted, please look at the core services and assess the value that businesses are receiving. I did like Mayor Sim's comments about we need to look at ways to generate revenue. Thank you for the Budget Task Force. So please just continue supporting us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, well, that does bring us to the end of the speakers list. So I just want to say thank you to everybody who joined us in chambers here to speak to this item. So we are now at the stage where I'll be looking for a mover of the motion that is in the report. Thank you, Councillor Klassen. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Dominato. And Council, any discussion? Councillor Klassen.
I want to thank the speakers today. It is not lost on us how difficult not only today but the last few years have been for our small businesses in our business areas. You have been steadfast in working and in being their voice, whether it's CFIB, members of the BIA partnership, and other leaders in the community. This is a transition period for sure. When we took office, we evaluated the levels of services that were in the city right now and saw that they had really declined. And so our first goal was to try and make sure that we brought those services back up. Now our goal is to try and get that tax rate down. And that work began with the Mayor's Budget Task Force, but it also includes other efforts in direction to the staff to try and really find ways for us to reduce those costs. This is a path that we're headed on, and I hope to see that we are able to bring those rates down in order to try and support our businesses, and as well make sure that that the services that are there that our small business and retail operators rely upon. But also know that we all have other work that we can be doing with our provincial partners. There has been a letter that was submitted last fall to the Minister of Municipal Affairs with regards to try and reduce the pressure of the provincial school tax. So those are things that we can do as a city and as a council to try and advocate. But we also need to continue to listen to you and continue to have these conversations. Our regular interactions and meetings that we have with the BAA partnership are one part of that, and our full-throated support of our new Business and Economy Office to have somebody who will work very closely with our BIAs, CFIB, and other representatives, such as the Board of Trade, to make sure that we are a very strongly supportive of our business community. So with that, I just want to again acknowledge what we heard and thank all of the business operators across our city who do bring that vibrancy, who are have been shouldering the burden of additional cost pressures from all sides, and that we are with you, and we want to try and continue to support and listen to you for the rest of this term and beyond. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Klassen. Councillor Kirby-Young.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I also want to acknowledge and thank the speakers for coming and sharing their thoughts. And look, it's tough out there. We know that it is. We are very alive to this issue. We want to have a city where small businesses, which are really the heart of our communities and the lifeblood they provide, they make it interesting. They're destination gathering places. They're a huge part of our community. And we want to make sure that they can not only survive, but thrive here in the city. We did move that 2% tax shift last term. I was happy to bring that forward and gain support from colleagues to do that. And we did that because we recognized Vancouver needed to be competitive. And we're going to continue to monitor that. That is our commitment. To ensure that we are. There's a lot we've got work to do, quite frankly, in ensuring that we continue to streamline our processes and our services to deliver them as cost effectively as possible and with as much benefit to the small businesses. And that work is underway. So it is a process. It's going to take a bit of time to get there. We're seeing some of the early dividends pay off. But as was mentioned, we've got more work to do. So what I want to acknowledge is that this type of dialogue is really important. We meet with the BIAs regularly, as we did last term. And that has been a really valuable forum for us to continue to have these dialogues. So I don't see this as a sort of one and done conversation. I think it's an important and an ongoing one. And we want to make sure that we're delivering for small business. We need your voices to be active participants in the new Small Business and Economy Office. We need you to kind of continue to hold our feet to the fire as we do that work. With the Mayor's Budget Task Force and look to bring things forward. There's a lot of investment that is happening in areas that small businesses have said that's where you want to see the money going, whether it's in public safety, fully supporting our police and fire services, or in supporting a vibrant city and those things that are economic drivers that bring in customers and revenue to the small businesses, whether it's supporting and uplifting our tourism sector or large events that are coming in that have incredible economic benefits and legacies from FIFA to a number of others. So yeah, I really appreciate the work. It's not a no, I think it's a not now in terms of monitoring that, but we do, again, it is our commitment to try to continue to deliver that value and to ensure that Vancouver is relatively competitive. The last thing I'll say is that tax policy is complex and there's a number of intersecting factors. So it's not just the tax rate allocation and the annual property tax increases that we want to aspire to delivering a reasonable number there that straggles, hits that sweet spot between benefit and ensuring we can deliver the services and it's still reasonable. But there's also the cost and the value of land, and Vancouver has obviously a a pretty significant burden there in terms of how that plays in the mix. So we're very alive to the issue. We appreciate all the comments, and we'll continue to work together. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Councillor Kirby-Young. And Mayor Sim.
Thank you. Sorry, thank you very much. And I just want to say thank you to all the speakers. And I know you all personally, and you know, thank you for bringing the passion and fighting for small business. And thank you for not being afraid to have these conversations in this chamber. And it makes us stronger for it. It makes us all stronger for makes us all stronger because of the challenges that you present in this chamber. I'm just going to put it out there. You know, if our small businesses don't succeed, we don't succeed. I think we're all on the same page on that one. And what we want to do is we want to create a place where our businesses can succeed. And, you know, to Emily's point, like you mentioned the comment balancing act. And so, yeah, we have a lot of competing interests, and our view is, I feel that what we have to do is we have to drive in a direction to get to that end goal where our businesses can succeed. And sometimes, you know, we'll agree with some of the choices we make and some that we don't. And so when we look at tax policy here, it really sucks in terms of, like, you know, to Neil's point, there's like all these different jurisdictions that are just taxing and taxing and taxing. And so what we do here is we're taking a balanced approach, and we also sort of want to be clear as to where the investments are going. And so when we spoke with small businesses and different BIAs and communities, cost is one thing. Also, public safety was another issue, and cleanliness, and people feeling the perception of safety on the streets, as an example, or regulatory red tape, where there are too many different business license classes. And so when we looked at that, we actually started to look at what would have the most meaningful impact. So we, for the first time in a decade plus, we have a fully funded Vancouver Fire and Rescue Service, Vancouver Police Department. We've done a lot of work on graffiti abatement. We've basically streamlined a lot of the business license processes, and we'll continue to do a lot of these things. And when we look at this stuff, like, I like to put the, you know, what does this really mean to the average business owner? You know, we have a small business as well. And a 1%, if we were to do a 1% tax shift, it would, the median business property in Vancouver would see $168 savings. And yeah, like every bit counts. And what effect on the business would we have on business if the perception and the reality is we have safer streets and cleaner streets and we have a revitalized Chinatown? What does that actually mean to the businesses in Chinatown or Gastown when people are told by tour operators not to go past the steam clock because it's not safe, or people don't necessarily feel safe in the evening on the Granville Entertainment District? So we're taking all these things, we're balancing it, and the other side of the matter is the residential taxpayers, they are, you know, by default funding these additional police services as well. So I want to paint one vision for you. This is not the end. We have the Mayor's Budget Task Force, and we're going to be talking about that later and how we implement these things. We want to increase revenues that are not taxes that people will enthusiastically invest in. So we'll be talking about naming rights. And through these actions, we can start to reduce the tax burden, at least from the City of Vancouver's perspective, while additionally to that, creating an environment where our businesses can succeed beyond, you know, just a tax break. There's actually an environment where people feel safe and it generates revenue because more people are coming in and this place is more vibrant. So I just wanted to be clear, that's what we're working on. So our businesses don't think that, you know, they're forgotten. Very far from it. We think about it all the time. And thank you very much for coming in here and showing the passion and challenging us. And we welcome this. We really appreciate your work on this. So thank you.
And thank you very much, Mayor Sim. As chair, I just want to also echo and actually hand over the chair to Councillor or Vice Chair Show just to make a few comments. My colleagues have spoken very well to this issue. This decision's not made today. It's not made lightly by any stretch. The tax shift was something that I wholeheartedly supported in 2019. We know now that we are dealing with a very different context, not only for residents, but also for businesses in this post-COVID era. And the challenges related to that in terms of affordability, everybody's feeling that, that piece. So what I've heard today, and I think are incredibly important advocacy points from our speakers. So those are taken to heart, and I'm very grateful that we have open dialogue on a regular basis with everybody that signed up to speak today, because that's what's required to continue to move forward. The risk, of course, is we come away from this decision and the small business community feels unsupported by council. That lands heavy, for sure, and that isn't hopefully the message that is heard. It's that we need to continue to grow the city together, and we highly, highly value our small business and local economic development in terms of the dependency that our city has on local small business to work. So in terms of jobs, in terms of access to goods, and in terms of just growing a healthy city together. And these are extremely challenging times. I think one of the key things that I heard is around the feedback of the Ernst & Young report. I thought it was lacking significantly also, and I hope that this will be feedback that can go back to EY. It shared sort of different nuances that residents are facing, but no nuances to what businesses are facing in terms of social issues, the increased pressures around COVID related to the demand on small business budgets outside of just simply tax, but the others that sort of chip away at any real lift up or profits that our small business can glean from a really taxed market. So I think the EY report was definitely lacking in that regard, and hopefully that is feedback that goes back. And I think the other thing is acknowledging Grace's hard work, and the whole team is well deserved. We didn't have the DPRP program in 2019. We have it now in its early days. We need to double down, I'd say, on that particular program to make sure that the right businesses are receiving the financial credits and benefits that that program can provide. Because we know that with a blanket tax shift, it doesn't allow us that level of flexibility. And then municipal growth framework, I think the report also identified, which was not brought up yet today, is around how much Vancouver invests in housing outside of our mandate. It's an extraordinary amount of money. And so when you look at Calgary, when you look at Toronto, when you look at Montreal as comparison, large cities, Vancouver's an outlier in terms of how much we invest in housing. And so when it comes down to the list of core services, housing's not on there, yet it's something that we have been contributing into in a significant way for a very long time. And so we're looking at the municipal growth framework approach at the national level, provincial advocacy, to start to parse out some of those ways that we can fund those core services and the additional services, social issues, housing, childcare, other things in different ways that are direct line of revenue away from property tax from the federal and provincial government. So that in itself is a shift that's starting to, or it's a conversation that's starting to take shape. And even just yesterday, we talked about the changes in legislation around the transit-oriented development, and in there are around DCLs being able to fund police, fund fire, things that we've never been able to do before. So as that was already commented, tax policy is complex, and there's a lot that feeds into it. And we have the responsibility to look at all of those pieces and be able to knit together what that long-term shift can look like. So Councillor Kirby Young said it well. This is not the end of this conversation. It really is just a not now. But I think that it needs to be ongoing. We've seen iterative tax shifts over the last 20 years. And so we need to continue to weigh those options ongoing into the future. And certainly that's something that I hear as a commitment of this council today. So I'll leave that there. Appreciate the time to make those comments. And again, thank you very much to the speakers and to staff for bringing this forward today. Thank you, Councillor Joe. Seeing no one else in the queue, we will go to a vote. Thank you very much, and that motion does pass with unanimous support. So thank you again. I think what we'll do is we'll just take maybe a 2-minute recess. Is that okay for everybody? Yep, take a 2-minute recess, and when we come back, we are going to move to the budget resolution 2B.